How long does it take to get to that like Regina area? Is it like
From here?
Yeah.
If you go straight south, 4 hours.
It's
You
almost
go on the bad highway. It's
almost
4
the
hours.
same distance just to come to my place, and I'm in like another province.
I thought you were like 6 hours.
Yeah. In 4 hours, 6 hours. I mean, at that point, what's the difference?
Yeah, that's true.
So,
Yeah, it was 4 hours to Edmonton from Meadow,
mm,
and we're 2.5 hours from Meadow from here. So to get to Edmonton, it'd be 6.5 hours.
yeah.
Unless you went through Battleford, I guess probably faster.
No, yeah, well, yeah, but I mean, you got to stop once in a while. So it took me a total of 7 hours to get here,
That's not bad.
right? Or a little less than 7 hours to get here, with
Yeah.
stops. Like I had to stop a couple times, grab a Pepsi and a hot chocolate.
This is why the internet's useful, because then you can just visit via Zoom.
True,
Which
but then you
I
got to pay for Zoom.
It's cheaper than gas for one trip for the year
Fair enough.
subscription.
Fair enough.
There you go.
Yeah, it's just not the same though. Like I like
No,
the
I
in
know,
person. Like it was really cool to be able to come and to see how your youth group runs and like meet your kids, and like that's cool. That's a neat experience, right? Like to come into someone's youth group and just
Different world.
just be kind of opened up to what they're doing and see these kids. And what's neat is like you come into a youth group and you see these other kids and you're thinking, well, they're not going to be like the kids in my own youth group, but there's certain characteristics you're like, no, this is like
It's universals.
like they're the same everywhere.
Yeah.
And then there's certain things that are different. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting because they're from a different context.
So what would be something? Because I know the similarities are usually like, I mean, kids are kids.
Yeah.
People are people. I
Yeah.
mean, we all have our. I mean, everyone's got the crazy kids,
Yeah.
right? And I mean, kids are always dealing with the same issues, for the most part, across the board, and a lot of it just stems down to fears and insecurities and how those show themselves in various ways, and that's kind of across the board. But I'm curious to know, like, what are some of the differences between what you saw here and for like your crew back home?
Yeah. So one of the differences that I saw was I want to decide how I want to describe it. So one of the things is like I'm in a really rural area. We're not in a city. We're in small schools, and so I always say our churches are almost always 5 to 10 years behind culture, and the rural communities another 5 years. So we're a ways behind culture in a sense. We're catching up with what's going on in
Right.
city centers. And now, even though you're not in a huge city,
That's still city.
you still have some more of that city context. So, so like more cell phone use in the room, which like my youth have cell phones, but I don't know. It's like
they're not attached to them as much.
not, some of them are, but most of them really aren't as much.
That's interesting.
And then I have a lot more of that like traditional kind of Sunday school stuff behind it.
Yeah.
And these kids, like when you asked them questions, it was really interesting to watch them. Their first answers were actually what the cultural commentators are saying is normal right now. Was like, you're like, well, where does value come from? And the first answer that someone said was self.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's exactly what our culture is saying today, is that value does come from yourself.
Create it.
You create your own value, and yourself is the judge of your own value. And so that was a difference. And I think my youth probably believe that, but if I ask the question, they're going to say Jesus.
They know the Jesus answer,
right? They're gonna give that Jesus answer.
I think I know what I'm supposed to say,
which is less honest, I think.
Yeah. What's
right?
fascinating actually with our crew is the one family, there's a couple Nigerian kids that were here. They moved to Canada 3 years ago now, and they are more. They know that the one boy knows his Bible.
This is the guy in the back here, right?
What's that?
The kid in the back here?
Yeah, the tall guy. Yeah, Michelle. Yeah, he's he's. I'm like, oh my goodness, you know way more than I did at your age, and a different cultural mentality, different mentality with. I've noticed even too with how they respond to people in leadership, and that's been really interesting to see. So yeah, it's interesting having the cultural demographics now moving more and more into our world. Like our church feels fairly diverse. We have a lot of families from all over the place now, and I love it. I think it's a more accurate picture of what church is supposed to be. But it's curious to see how that shifts, even just youth group dynamics. I want to make a phone bucket. Apparently they work. Every youth person I talk to, like, yeah, just put them in the bucket. The kids actually, like, had my Anglican buddy, they did a retreat out at the camp, and he said they took the phones away from all the kids and they actually played the board games and had conversations, and it's amazing. I mean, phones are just a safety net, just a comfort. What's that? Comfort blanket.
Yeah. I like how you handled that yesterday, though. Like in the Bible study time, you're just like, okay, who's got a Bible on their phone? Let's go. Like, open it up. Oh, look at these verses. Like, that's been my strategy with phones. Has been, okay, it's a tool.
Yeah.
Let's use it. So I'll have kids sometimes ask me like a theology question. I'll go, well, what did you find when you Googled it? I go, I didn't Google it. I said, okay, I have an answer I'll give you, but I want you to do a little research first, and then come back to me.
That could be dangerous.
It is dangerous, but
at least you're starting.
But it's getting them to start thinking and critically, like, and looking for. And then when I go, okay, well, the information you found was a little bit weak.
Theologywiki.com.
Right. But I thought that was really good, and like every kid had a phone, so they all opened them up and were like looking up the verses you told them to go to, right? Like that was fantastic. Like that's good.
Yeah, well, some of them do, and then if they don't, they're like, "Well, I don't have that on my phone." It's like, "Well, get the app on your phone, right?"
Yeah,
like,
you have Google or whatever. You can just go to BibleGateway.com or .org or whatever.
Yeah, that helps too.
Yeah, not a sponsor. I think you're supposed to say that when you're on YouTube and you don't sponsor things.
Yeah, this has been brought to you by Bible Gateway.
Then I'll start emailing them. Hey,
you give me $100 a month. Any money? I'm so poor.
Get that one fly out.
Please help.
Yeah, this hasn't been cheap, but it's been fun. Yeah, no, there's definitely a difference. And like your demographic, like you were just saying, like you've got a family came from Nigeria, and yeah, like last night you had a more culturally diverse youth group than I do. My youth group's a little bigger than yours, numbers wise, but they're pretty much all like
bush kids.
Well, yeah, they're all farm kids, right?
Yeah.
Well, they're not all farm kids, but mostly. And all white,
and like, kids that have known each other their whole lives, probably. Yeah,
like they've all grown up together.
Yeah. Where these guys, I mean, 3 years. 3 years. It's probably all they've known each other. But mind you, they go to the same school, so that helps.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. But still, if they've only known each other 3 years, like you're really creating a space where they build that initial relationship that theoretically could last a lifetime if they're, if they commit to one another in that friendship.
Yeah.
Which you talked about last night, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, well, that's one thing that's hard. I've wrestled with that so much with like how to run devos. I feel like I've tried everything under the sun for games and devos and strategies, and my whole youth ministry. If we want to throw this on the channel, my whole youth ministry philosophy is boiled down to creating a safe and loving space for kids to actually come and just hang out, because half the stuff I say, they're never going to remember. But the experiences they have, and if they genuinely feel cared for, they will remember that. Or at least that when I went to that church, I felt cared for. And I think that will... Yeah, I mean, that's not to negate the importance of trying to teach kids, but it can be discouraging when especially when you've gone through like I remember being a kid though too, and I didn't listen very well, and I get that, and that wasn't what spurred me on post college when I came to the crossroads of like, what do I want to do with my life? Do I actually want to commit to following Jesus? I have the freedom to make all these choices now, and it wasn't ever, well, somebody taught me this once. It was very much what I experienced as far as my youth group growing up, and my family, and my church being a place where I always felt, I felt loved. I very much did, by my friends too. We had a good crew, and that was a real privilege looking back. But so at the end of the day, I can't make a bunch of scholars out of these kids. It's not the intention, but it can be discouraging when you've gone through all the training and you're like, oh man, this is so exciting, and you try to explain to the kids and they're like, what's the Bible? You're like, you've been here for 2 years, how do you not, like, we talk about it every night, I don't understand, right? So some of that can be disheartening, but they just don't care. They don't care as much, and trying to find a way for them to care is hard. And it's easy to beat ourselves up over that. But I think one thing I feel confident that we've excelled at is the kids, when they come here, they know that this is a place where they're cared for, where they can have fun,
Mm-hmm.
where they can know that somebody actually truly cares about them,
Mm-hmm.
especially because a lot of those kids, you hear their stories and it's like that's not the kind of life they've been living at home or at school. And so if this can be a place that is vastly different, I think that's a really good step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and none of that to knock the importance of like, hey, yeah, we should be trying our best to teach kids scripture and that kind of stuff, and about who Jesus is. But that's a lot easier said than done.
But you know, like,
yeah,
but I think you're onto something, right? Like there is something valuable about going, hey, what they're going to remember is whether or not they were cared about.
Yeah.
And I mean, so I got to come out to your youth group last night, and the reality is like those kids were comfortable here.
Yeah.
With the exception maybe of a couple of the girls seemed a little bit less comfortable, but I think they're probably less comfortable just in general. Yeah.
That's just them.
I didn't read it as they were uncomfortable here, but they just seemed uncomfortable in general in a group. And that could just be personality. Like that's fine. But what I did see was like most of these youth, they came in and it was like, this is a space they were really comfortable in. Right. Yeah. No one seemed to be in that really awkward, I've never been here.
Yeah, if you've been here before, well, some of those kids, I think most of those kids come here regularly for church too.
Okay.
So the kids that don't have had them, and I mean, there's always that ice breaking. I've never gone here before. It's a weird place. And I think those initial impressions of like, hey, you're welcome here.
Mm-hmm.
You can have fun here. You can let your guard down a little bit. There's a couple high school girls that come with my high school boys, and they've periodically come back over the year, and it's interesting to see how much more comfortable they are,
right?
Because the space isn't so strange anymore. But for a lot of kids, they're like, I've never been to a church. Like, what is that like in there? And it's different too at youth group compared to like an adult who's walking to a church, because kids come in here and we're just like kicking balls all over the place.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different. It's like treating this place like a jungle gym.
Yeah.
Versus, you come in on as an adult. It's usually the only time you're coming is for a social gathering of worship of some kind,
mm-hmm.
not just like a rowdy sports event or something.
Yeah. So. Oh yeah. No, I get parents who come into my church. Same thing. We have a big 9 square in the air.
Oh, I want to get one of those.
They're so cool. Totally worth it.
I just build one. Put it in the gym.
Yeah. Oh, there's tons of ways to build them very cost effectively. I had my youth leaders, they're all farm, they're farm guys. They're like, oh yeah, we could build these. And they're like, oh, we'll build one. And after a year of not building it, I put in a request for a recreation grant with our county.
Yeah.
And they'll give you money for recreational stuff, anything to help with youth activities.
Oh man.
So I'm like, well, a 9 square is an activity. That's like a sport just about.
And it's cheap.
Right. Well, they're $700 if you buy them from the company. If you buy the brand name.
Jeez.
So
just get PCP pipe and
well, you could do that.
Put it together.
But I just applied through the grant, and I bought one brand name. Brought
sweet.
A brand name 9 square.
Is it metal?
No, they're plastic, but they're just really well designed.
Right.
And it's like quick setup, quick takedown. It comes with
nice.
balls. It comes with everything you need. And so I set that up in my sanctuary because it's the only room in the whole church with a high enough ceiling to play the game. And so we have parents will come in who come on church on Sundays, and they're kind of like, I'm just not going to go look in there. It's just chaos, right? There's balls everywhere. There's kids playing a game.
Love it,
but it's so good, right?
That's what it should be.
It makes church less intimidating and less of this foreign land.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that there shouldn't be something unique and different about the church experience and the youth group experience, but like you're saying, there should be something vastly different about it. And yet it shouldn't be so vastly different that like we got to choose where those differences are. Yeah. I don't know if stodgy or boring is the difference I want it to have. So it's like, let's come and have a game. I don't want
to be afraid to walk into a church building.
Yeah. And man, nothing breaks the ice like a game together.
It's true.
Right? Like you guys were doing soccer and you had Frisbee going a bit. Like that breaks the ice. If you're new and you walk in and it's like, oh, just got to kick a ball. Okay. 10 minutes in, you're like one of the guys. You're one of the people, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like I felt welcomed by that. I jumped in and right away, one of the younger guys, one of the skinnier guys in the group started trying to shove me. And I'm like, you realize I'm fat, right? Like I just planted my feet and he's like, can't move me. But that moment, like immediately I felt there was a relational connection with this kid. And it's like, okay, well, all of a sudden I feel welcome to be part of this youth group, even though I'm just visiting.
Yeah.
And that's
kids are easygoing too, I find. That's one of the so many funny things I found in youth. Kids are easy to talk about hard things with. I've discovered way more than adults, probably because their opinions haven't been formed, right? But they haven't fully grown up hearing one thing or another, and so like
they're more willing to test an opinion.
They're so willing to just talk about it, and or just to be like, oh hey, you're new, how's it going? It's interesting. As people get older sometimes and more formulated in what they believe, what they know sometimes, both just the way I shouldn't say this isn't universal because there's a lot of great adults out there, but some people become very closed off or more opinionated. I've found for the most part the kids are pretty open about that stuff, and it's kind of like this reverse teaching moment. Like I'm supposed to be teaching you, but you're actually all modeling whether you know it or not. So like this open, transparent relationship, which is actually really cool. So just something we're going for anyways. But I don't think you've asked me a single one of your questions yet.
No, but this has actually been a really good conversation. Like the questions are there. I give out small group questions to my youth group leaders, and they're like, sometimes we don't get to any of them. I said, that's okay. They're there for when you have nothing else to talk about, right? Fair. Like if there's nothing valuable to talk about, then you throw in a question.
Well, I guess I told you about my youth group.
You did. So the next question on there is, what's been one of your high points in youth ministry? Like you've been doing this for what, 8-9 years now?
Starting year 9. Yeah.
Yeah. So pretty much the same amount of time as I've been in my church, right? I'm starting my 10th year here coming up. So what's one high point, or like what's one of those moments you're like, this is awesome?
Well, serve last year was fun.
Yeah.
Both serves. I've done it twice now, and we're hosting this year. But I think, or youth retreats, in the past, there are times of just concentrated. I'm gonna sneeze.
That's okay. Stare at the window. It'll make you sneeze.
It'll come at an opportune time.
I can edit that kind of stuff. I'll just do a lot of jump cuts. Make you say whatever I want.
I hate kids. You edited me, so why'd you make me say that?
Well, now that you've said the word hate,
I hate kids. Anyways, I like the experiences where we can take that concentrated time together. It's kind of like there's a reason why camp affects kids in a certain way. Like kids always come back and be like, oh yeah, the camp high, and it's like, no, you just had great relational experiences with friends and with God in this concentrated dose, and well, that's not necessarily realistic to experience that all day every day. It's a wonderful experience to be able to have, and it's fun to be a part of that and to watch the kids. I think my biggest highlight is anytime the kids ever come back or say, God really touched my heart in this way or spoke to me in this way, or they begin asking questions about scripture and about life, like genuine, honest, inquisitive questions, to be like who am I? Like what is the Bible? What am I supposed to do with life? Just anything where all of a sudden it's not just the fun and games anymore, but it's time for a real conversation. And those are for sure my highlights, when we can sit down, because that's just the start of an ongoing conversation at that point. Or maybe it's just for that moment. So we had a lot of those at Serve. Just every time we sat down, the kids reflected on the day, and just their experience of worshiping together with so many other kids their age. Brought down a lot of walls and fears, I think, about maybe feeling alone. I think a lot of Christian kids in youth group feel alone, in the sense of like, there's a whole, I was thinking about this, like even our demographics of PA, there's like, we're 35,000. We have the biggest high school in Saskatchewan, which is close to 2,000 kids. Wow. Plus another high school, which is 600 kids, which is the Catholic one.
Wow.
So that's like 2,600 youth. And how many of those kids are actually in youth group or going to church?
Small percentage.
Like 1%, maybe, if we're lucky. Like, what would 1% be? 1% would be 26 kids, right?
Yeah.
Okay, more than that. 2%. But, like, I'm talking about all the youth groups combined in PA.
Yeah.
Like, you're probably getting 50 kids. Now, I'm not saying that's all the Christian kids that exist in town, but it's telling.
So there's no like massive youth group somewhere in town that's drawing all the kids now?
You got the Alliance Church, you got the Pentecostal Church, you got Birch Hills, which is out of town, you got ours, you got Embassy, and so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually, I don't even know if those guys do youth group. I know Alliance, us, and Embassy were the 3 big ones, and we all averaged anywhere in my entire time, anywhere from like 10 to 20 kids.
Right.
So if we were all at 20, that's 60 kids. Plus Birch Hills is another 20. So like maybe 100 kids in all of the PA and surrounding area that actually...
Out of like 2,600 students in a high school.
Yeah, and that's just...
Wow.
That's just high school. That's not even counting grades 7 and 8, which is kind of wild. So I know those kids could feel like it'd be weird to be a Christian in school.
Yeah, you'd feel like the minority.
Well, you are. You are a drop in the sea.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit different than my experience growing up. Like we had 1, 2, 3 main churches in town, and we all had, I mean, if there's 60 of us, but that's a high school and junior high school population of 400 combined.
Right.
So suddenly we're 10%. And that's a lot. That's a lot bigger.
That's a
right. So it doesn't feel as foreign or as weird. And these are your friends, and
you feel like you have a group you belong to. You actually have a little bit of impact on the culture of your school when you have that percentage. Right. But 1 or 2% isn't hardly even going to be noticed in terms of like care. Or, like they're not going to have a lot of influence in their culture, in their community. Unless they're really loud about it, right? Like, unless they're really intentional about it. And that's scary, too, because you're in high school. It's terrifying to stand out for something that was only a few of you standing out for, you know? Like,
yeah. However that looks, that can depend, too. But
well, and we're into some are saying, I suppose, I read an article the other day about we're in an era where attitude towards Christianity in the church is very negative. And so, and youth are more attuned to that than anyone.
Well, I think youth kids, because I've been reading a lot of that stuff too. Youth kids it's their parents, who were the predominant culture of that. Call it what, I don't know, crazy Christian experience,
right?
Yeah, kind of through COVID and everything else, and so but I've heard some interesting stories about how, what was it? The kids coming up to some of these pastors and leaders being like, help my parents.
Yeah.
Like, cause they've gone off the rockers. So like, I think the kids, it's going to be a different world for them growing up in faith. And I mean, that's pretty cultural, like depending on where you live. Like we're not in Bible Belt America here, but
yeah, we're talking like Canada, right? Like but northern.
What happens when their whole crazy shebang political world comes and affects church culture in our world, and which affects the kids of the people who, pick a side, and if you want to be really adamant about one, and so I mean it's just another generation dealing with different problems in the world, like we are. Like we're set in our unique space and time to deal with the issues of our day, and I don't think that's a new experience. So it's just going to look a bit different for them. But I am actually pretty optimistic for the future of faith in our world. I think there's been a lot of, I don't know, sounds a bit critiquey, but like shallow Christianity that has been chafed off in the last few years due to so much controversy and conflict and like ugly, right? So some people have been burnt. Some people have just kind of given up, but I think people who genuinely desire to follow Jesus with all their heart are forming a new Christian culture that I'm curious to see what that looks like in 10 years, and the kids will hopefully be shaped and molded by that. So we'll see how that goes. But wait and see.
I had some raised eyebrows at me a couple years back because I said I think I'm okay with the rise of atheism and all that kind of stuff, and someone looked at me kind of funny, raised eyebrows, and I went, well, because I think it gives opportunity for the church to become the church of believers and not a church of culture. You know what I mean? Like we'd become a Christianity that was just like, that's what you do on Sunday. And it's like, I'd rather have a Christianity of people who are like, no, this is what I want my life to be about. I want to live for God and for his kingdom, not just because I'm told I have to, or because I've been dragged to it. Right. Like I kind of am okay with a culture that invites other options and even says, you don't have to choose Christianity, if that helps refine us into a Christianity of chosen
choose
believers,
Jesus.
Right?
Like if here's your options, what reason do I have to choose Jesus in all of this?
Yeah,
that's kind of a funny topic to bring up, because like that was like the big bad boogeyman growing up in high school, is atheism and science versus the church, and now it's just like that is the least worrisome conversation.
That's right.
Like nobody's stressing out about that.
Yeah.
Well, at least not in my world, but.
I think there's probably still some who are still arguing that debate, but I just don't think that's the debate of today. You know, I don't think that's today's issue.
So like, oh, that's easy. That's easy compared to what's, it's an easier conversation compared to what some of the ones that we're dealing with today. But
so in today's world, what do you think is like one of the main challenges for teenagers? It's like in your context, you were talking about the loneliness of being alone, like of being a small number of them. But
that is an easy answer.
Yeah,
I think, and this is just not just kids, but culture at large. And I mean, we could go down the whole sexuality rabbit hole, but I don't even think that's the root issue. The root issue, from my perspective, is all about identity.
Yeah.
In the sense of sexuality is just a byproduct of the identity crisis of people.
Yeah.
I want to have meaning in my life, and I'm going to do everything I can to create that value and to be accepted, to have, to feel like I'm a valuable human being. And how do I go about doing that? Well, maybe that's through getting attention through whatever means. And I mean, man, you see it, and it's like, you see the sulky teenager over in the corner who's like, oh, I don't want to talk to anybody. So, well, you might be sad or upset, but what you're doing is you're vying for attention, because you want to be cared for and you want to be accepted and loved, and people do get attention that way, and that feels a small little, oh yay, people care about me, but that's that's not the healthy or good way to go about that.
Yeah.
Right. And so at the end of the day, like, trying to, like, I mean, I think that's another reason I've been loving going through the Sermon on the Mount is Jesus's context for devotions and youth group. As Jesus is talking about what life is like in his kingdom and the kind of culture that's going to pervade it, and it's all rooted in these relational, well, like we said, the righteousness of Jesus, the right relationship. I love that. I've heard that a few times now. That's righteousness is a confusing word, but when you frame it in right relatedness, to be right with others and with God, that makes a lot more sense to me. But if that's what Jesus is getting at, there's something about that desire and that craving to be accepted that is just so natural in Jesus's kingdom, because it's not like we're just accepting, like, it's not like, oh, anything goes, but it's like, no, I actually genuinely care about you as a person. Yeah. And if that's the predominant attitude of Jesus followers, my goodness, that's got some transformative power to it. So, and I think with kids, with adults, with anybody, we all want to be loved and accepted, and like that's a universal human reality. Yeah. Nobody's like, oh yeah, I just want to be shunned by the world. No, you don't. And so how do we go about modeling that for folks in the world? And that's a challenge, because it's not, a lot of times that can be uncomfortable, because you're engaging with people that aren't in your social sphere. You're loving people who think very differently and might even be loud about how they think. But how you respond to people really matters. And it really mattered to Jesus. And he models that the best out of anybody, because I mean, he is God and it's his kingdom. So thank goodness he provided a model, which was loving service to other people and humble compassion. So there you go. I think, I don't know. I think, I mean, we could nitpick all the youth, all the things that are like, oh, what should we do with church and with youth? But that's a big umbrella bracket of like,
Yeah.
here's the underlying issue that so many other things stem out of, is people and kids are not finding their value in who God has called them to be. Yeah. And just understanding that God made me, therefore I am a valuable human being in his eyes, and should be in every Christian's eyes, because we should know that we are also made in God's image and are valuable, but sometimes we don't treat each other that way, which is a shame.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I think the identity issue is really the root of our cultural issues right now. Like the I shouldn't say issues maybe, but challenge. Like it's the greatest challenge facing young people is, how do I develop an identity?
Yeah.
Where does my value come from? And then how do I present that to the world? Yeah. Right. And so like I see in youth group a lot of that performance.
Yeah.
To be like, and I was explaining this to a parent because they were worried about their kid, and it totally makes sense. They were like, my kid is doing some stuff that is like totally not what I ever thought they'd do. So that's okay. They're experimenting and they're putting on a performance of various types of performances to see which one is going to get them the recognition and the identity that is going to feed their need for, I don't know, for value, to be valued. Because I was reading recently on this kind of stuff as well. And it talks about how we're selves and we give ourself our own value. So we find this idea, or this is what our culture is being taught right now, is that you get value from yourself, but you're being taught that you get value from yourself, but you don't get value only from yourself. It's a relational experience. Yeah. We're relational creatures, right? And so you then have to go and put on a performance to get acceptance and approval for the self-valuation that you gave yourself to everybody else around you, from everybody else around you. So it's a relational experience of getting value from the people around you. And what we miss, though, is what you just said, is what you were picking up on, I think, is this essentially the relationship that matters, that actually gives us value and fulfills that need of identity, comes from God. Right. Not just from another person who is themselves trying to put on a show to gain approval and recognition for their self. Right? Like, and so that's a big challenge, because we're in a culture that's trying to say you can find value and meaningful relationship and life-giving identity without God. Yeah. And we're standing over here in this corner going like, with the 1% of our kids, going, hey, actually, if you really want to find value, it's really only found with God.
Right.
And everything
which is a different conversation than, hey, you're all a bunch of sinners and need to,
right.
Which is sometimes the approach. Or like, hey, like one thing that I wrestle with is there's a Christian mentality that says we need to Christianize the non-Christian world, in ethics and everything, and it's like, man, you don't like that when people do that to you, right? Yeah. So how do you focus on the value piece of communicating? Hey, you are actually a valuable person. Yeah. And you don't have to search in all these avenues to find that value, because you were actually born with it. That God formed you and made you. I mean, that's a difficult conversation, and knowing how to approach it. I mean, I think at the end of the day, that requires relational connection. Like, I need to know these people. I can't just go up to, I guess I could just go up to some random person and be like, God loves you, man, which we should do sometimes.
There's a place for that.
Yeah, but I'm a big advocate for the long-term relational connections that we have with each other. That van that just pulled up might be a parcel. 1 second, this guy's gonna go. Oh yeah, it is.
He's gonna go to the wrong door.
Peace out.
All right. Yeah.
I'll be back.
Okay.
So I should move that over to the camera.
It doesn't matter. We can wrap this up if you want. So.
No, it's all good. I think if I did this more often, I'd be more camera comfortable. I know that's a thing.
You don't come across as uncomfortable.
I'm so uncomfortable right now.
Really?
No, I'm fine. I'm fine.
You're doing fine. The cool thing about doing this with youth pastors, I think, is we are a talkative group when we get the opportunity.
You have to figure that out eventually, right?
It's like, it's something about, like, we want to talk about this stuff. And, and I think often we don't have the platform or just another person to talk to who gets it. So it's like,
it's a bit of a weird it's funny. I feel like a bridge between worlds sometimes. I saw him at our pastor's retreat. It's just funny talking to some of the some of the other pastors just about like youth and youth ministry, and they feel just lost talking to the kids, and in the sense of like it's a whole rapidly changing world. And I remember I was like, yeah, I'm too old for my kids and I'm too young for the pastors. It's just like I don't even know what world I fit into. But I mean, I've accepted that I'm old, and I just play that with the kids and be like, I can be the old guy here. It's like, no, I'm 31. I'm not that old yet. But I started at 22.
Yeah.
And like,
and you can see how much you've aged in those last 10 years, right?
Like I feel it in my body.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hurt so much more.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, I don't feel culturally irrelevant, but there's also like, if you, the big old person mistake, don't even try, because if you do, you're awkward, right? Like I don't try to use the fun kid lingo. I just try to, I'm not a Gen Zer, right? Yeah. I don't want to be, I am who I am, and I would rather just like have an honest conversation, or try to have a just genuine conversation or genuine relationship. And I mean, lingo is cultural anyway. Like what's universal is people just wanting to be talked to.
Yeah. I don't think youth are expecting adults to come in and talk their language.
Yeah.
What I find most effective is when we come in and we just genuinely care about that person. If you know their name,
that's what most people want.
That's what most people. I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. And if you know their name and you ask them how their day was, like that just opens the door.
Yeah.
All of a sudden they're going to talk to you about stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like I had the most meaningful conversation of my night last night was when I was talking to your wife.
Yeah.
And I mentioned just how nerdy I am, and talked about like, I've been watching an anime recently, and all of a sudden 3 of the teenagers walk in and go, are you talking about anime? I'm like,
nerds.
And all of a sudden but it was like, hey, now let's have a real conversation about life, because
I like this stuff too.
Because we like the same things and we're into the same activities. But I wasn't putting on a show in any way. I didn't talk in some weird language. No. It was just like we have similar interests, and now I'm a real person.
Right. And that's literally what that diva was on last night. Was stop portraying a version of yourself that is not real. But we hide behind our words. We hide behind what we want, the version of ourselves we want the world to see. And Jesus is like, nope, not in my kingdom. In my kingdom, you will be honest with yourselves and before others. And that's a good thing. It's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to be vulnerable.
It's so hard. I think
because you could drop the I like anime ball in a different group, and everyone would be like, that's so lame. and it's like,
just see the looks
but I like it.
See the looks like it at pastor conferences.
Oh man, yeah.
When I Naruto run across the gym.
It's super. Yeah. It's a weird thing. So like, for example, you and I both like Pathfinder. So then it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, should I bring up the fact that I like tabletop RPGs in a group of people who, in their world, when they grew up, that was the devil's lettuce right there. Like, well, that's a different product.
But, well, I get what you mean though.
But it was like, it was evil, right?
Yeah.
It's just like,
it was demonic. Yeah.
That's a demonic game. You're casting spells. That's evil. And it's like, that's not what it is. And we know that, but it's one of those things where learning to have, I don't know. It's a shame. Like I wish. It's actually something that I've personally wrestled with a lot, and I think as I'm getting older, I'm getting more comfortable. It's doubly hard as pastors, actually.
Yeah.
It's really hard. It's really hard to have a safe space as pastors, because I think there's an unrealistic pedestal that congregations put on pastors. From what I understand, it is another gift of the Spirit, and sure, it's a position of leadership, but like. Pastors are not Jesus.
No.
They are other fellow believers. But with that role, I think there's, I don't know how much you've seen it. I have in mind time. There's churches that get extremely damaged when pastors fail to be pastors. And so there is a high call there. But at the same time, it's like, but I'm also still a person. I'm not perfect. And I like dirty things, and I enjoy soccer, I enjoy disc golf, I enjoy watching anime, I enjoy playing tabletop RPGs or video games or whatever, and I think sometimes, and maybe this is an older generation thing, is like those are awkward conversations to bring up sometimes, because it's like, what you mean? Well, you don't just sit in your office all day and and live a perfectly moral life. And maybe that's not what people are actually expecting, but it feels that way sometimes when it's like, how can I actually be, maybe that Devo's speaking more to me than those kids. It was like, how can I actually be open and vulnerable as a pastor in a congregation? And this is what I'm saying. It's easier with kids. Like, I can tell the kids, here's all my faults. And they would be like, oh, that's cool. And I say that in the church and they'll be like, you're fired. They wouldn't actually say that, but I don't know. Maybe somebody would feel that way. And it's like, but I'm the same as you.
Yeah.
Like, you're in the same category as me. Like, we're all working to, and that's the fear thing, right? It's like, I am afraid that if I am open and vulnerable, that I will experience shame, be shamed or guilted. And I think people assume that, oh, because you're a pastor, you clearly have it more together than me, because I'm just a lowly congregant. And that might not be what anybody's actually saying out loud, but it feels that way. Mm-hmm. And so it's doubly hard to be honest, I think, as a pastor, which is also a scary place to be, because we need to be honest and vulnerable and model that. It's a contagious thing. That's something I've always talked about, is vulnerability is contagious. If somebody is, then it opens the door to admitting, hey, look, here's a sinful reality in my life that I'm working through and wrestling with.
Yeah.
People actually, I've noticed, tend to respond more with, oh, me too.
Yeah.
Right? And suddenly there's this level of transparency. But there is the times where people will be like, how could you do that? And then it makes it hard to work through that and to grow together.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my ideal picture for church would be a place where pastors included can be free to speak through. And I mean, this is where you find people that you trust, that you can talk to.
Yeah.
And it's not like you're preaching from the pulpit. So I'm a failure. Right?
I did.
Yeah. Man, that takes some guts. Depends what it is.
I mean, context, it was fine and it worked. It was part of, like, I'd gone through a process in my church where they'd asked me to step back from leadership and do some growing up, basically some growing up. Yeah. There were some issues and they were like, yeah, we see these issues. They're going to affect ministry. They're going to affect our church. Let's cut them off now. Let's work on it now before they become issues. So really great leadership who just really saw that need and took care of that. But the whole church was aware that I'd taken steps back. And so I came back and gave a sermon. And in that sermon, I was fairly vulnerable with what I'd been through. That's the interesting thing is when you're vulnerable so I was vulnerable with my youth group and with our church congregation. And both gave good responses. And this is on the internet. So, I want to sound really positive. Yay, my church was great. But the reality was, like, in the congregation, I received sympathy.
Yeah.
From my youth group, I received maybe empathy, but also I received from my youth group way more that, like, they came to me and, so how do I put this? My church congregation gave me a lot of sympathy. They came up to me, wow, that sounds really hard. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Or I'm glad that you're feeling like you've grown now and that kind of stuff. Like, it was more, they put it back on me, which is fine. But with my youth group, when I talked to them about this kind of stuff, about, like, depression and like challenges in my relationships, they came up and they went, well, I'm going through that.
Yeah.
And what you just said makes a difference. Or man, it feels so encouraging to know that you get how I'm feeling.
To be honest, half those adults probably are too.
Well, they are, but it's just interesting that the difference in the way that we react to it, right? Like, like the youth were way more willing to come up to me and say, that's something I've wrestled with too, and I'm struggling with that. And what are your thoughts, and how did you get through that? And okay, you were really, like, you talked about it, but it was only for a short message. Like, can we talk about that more? And I had more coffee meetings talking about, like, depression and stuff recently, or I shouldn't say recently, but when this happened about 6 years ago, because that was, like, so relatable to what teenagers deal with, right? They're dealing with anxiety and depression and rejection and relationship, and it's wild.
So,
but yeah, so I mean, like, and I'm not saying anything negative about how my church family handled any of that, but like, I think they were actually incredibly generous and kind to me. But it is different with youth, and as a pastor, though, we're in a weird role. I think you're absolutely right. Do you find that puts us in sometimes a place of loneliness? Like,
very much. Oh yeah. What's been really interesting, though, is, like, in even talking about this, is the pastors that, like, the older pastors and our regional minister in our congregation. The more I talk to them, the more they, like, just casually talk about this stuff too, or the fact of, like, things they've gone through or hardships, or I don't know. There's a certain amount of grace they give themselves that is so refreshing, and like it's like, oh my gosh, maybe I don't have to be so hard on myself.
Yeah.
Not to like lower the bar and like, oh, I can do whatever I want, but in the sense of like, yeah, like there is these are people who have lived through this as well. But loneliness in pastoral ministry for sure, and I think because of what I alluded to earlier, just like it's hard to be open.
Yeah.
It's loneliness in the sense of who do I actually have? Like, so like, I mean, I prayed for years for good friends and we have those now. I'm so thankful for it. And
that's huge.
Trying to start up with a good friend of mine, like we've been talking, we're like, hey, we should actually just like start a regular conversation of talking through the like hard things of life. Like, how are you actually doing?
Yeah.
What are the things you are genuinely wrestling with? And just like all the cards on the table kind of conversations. To find somebody like that is hard.
It's so hard.
And like, this is a fellow in our church and we're great friends, but it's like, and he's just like, it's like, you don't have to be my pastor in these conversations. And it's like, I appreciate that. And I joked, I said, but you have to be mine.
That's awesome.
I was just joking.
No, but that's awesome though. Like that's exactly. Like,
and I know from the bottom of his heart, he means that. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
we're just here talking as a couple dads, a couple friends, just working through the things of life, and having a safe space to challenge, to confess. And man, you can't do that with everybody.
No.
I wish we could, but I think that is, if I had to talk about ministry priorities, that would be up there in like the top two. I don't even know what the first one is. Loving Jesus, probably. That's pretty important.
That's the right answer. Yeah, that's probably the right
but
answer.
the second one would be find a good friend.
Yeah.
Honestly, like you could have all the good books. You could be struggling to preach, or I don't know, pick one. But having somebody you can actually talk to, honestly and openly, I think is probably the highest priority. Like, it's been weird in my church role. I've wanted a mentorship program, I think, since the day I got hired, and I've never really had that. I've always wanted, like, well, who's there to guide and to lead me, and maybe I look to our lead pastor at the time. But like, the church has been through a lot in the 9 years I've been here, and it was just never the time to, or maybe this was just a false expectation on my end to be like, oh, I'm just expecting you to help shape and mold me, and it's kind of been a, well, figure it out on your own type of reality. And this is one thing where I think I wish I had this sooner, like right out the gate, is having those close friends. But I mean, part of it's just been formed in our time in life here in the church, and we've had people we can talk to, but having like one or two people that you can like trust your life with is what it feels like.
Yeah.
And you know that no matter what you say, they're not going to be like, how could you?
Yeah.
You horrible sinner.
Yeah.
But I think that confession is really important, and that's something that it eases our heart and our burden, and allows us to actually admit to ourselves and to God and to others in a way that we can start growing. But even just like even simple things like, I've been angry lately and I don't know why, like really angry. And that's something that I've been just this last year. Like, I've never been an angry person my whole life, and it's just like it's coming out in weird ways this year. So that's like one thing, like we got to sit down and talk about that. Like, where's that coming from?
Yeah.
Like, why is it just moments where it's just like I'm so frustrated? And I think partially it's probably just been between life and church life, like, and the world and everything. As you get older, it's just like maybe you get more cynical, more discouraged. We can. Well, but at times I allowed that to negatively impact me, to be like, oh man, I'm so frustrated with like, why can't people just understand, XYZ? But it's like, I'm pretty sure they feel the same way. We're just on opposite ends of stuff.
Have you seen that video of the honest preacher gets up in front of his church? He's like, stop it. Stop sinning. It's like so good.
Yeah, if only it was that easy.
Yeah, I know, right? But I sometimes feel that in ministry. I'm just like, man, is nobody hearing it? Is nobody getting it?
Usually my stop it is stop being jerks to the world.
Yeah.
That's like, in a way, like, I don't know, it's feeling, and for me, that's as you can tell, that's one of my hot spots is trying to Christianize people who have a totally different worldview, a different value system.
And can we actually Christianize a culture?
No, you can't. Jesus can.
Yeah.
Jesus can.
I mean,
so how do I bring the world, like, because that's, to me, it's like, well, how do you actually impact the world? And it is the only way I am convinced of is by bringing them Jesus. And until somebody actually knows Jesus, like, if the Spirit's the one who shapes and changes our hearts and our conscience and our mind and guides us and empowers us, that is not my role in me telling you, hey, you're bad. You're doing it bad. Stop doing the bad things. Yeah. That, like, it's like the response isn't just no, it's like you're dumb and now you're mean and now you're critical. Yeah. And I mean, no wonder the church gets the bad rap it does when Christians feel like it's their job to condemn the evil, and like specifically with all the LGBTQ stuff going on in the world. Like that is probably one of the hottest conversations. And I'm like, you telling somebody, hey, the Bible says XYZ isn't gonna, or throwing it on Facebook, how, you know, a bunch of, like, there's been some horrible damage done, and it's like, it's not your role to convict people of their sin. That is the Spirit's role, and we can point people to Jesus, and we can actively live differently. And I think that's a big one. It's not saying we're going to roll over, because I think that's what a lot of Christians get accused of. Is like with kids, and especially in youth ministry, it's like, well, why don't you preach or teach on these things? I'm like, well, it's not going to change their minds. What will change their minds is them genuinely experiencing the loving presence of God, and being like, that's different. That's what I've been looking for. And same with we all want that. But I mean, that's getting into some into some contentious stuff. Maybe we don't have to necessarily throw that on the internet. I don't know.
It's the internet. Like I can't take it too seriously.
The comment section's gonna blow up.
Yeah, all 8 people who might watch this. Yeah, it'll be fine.
How could you say that?
The 8 kids from my youth group. Yeah, no, like, yeah, I think you're on to a lot of good things there. Like, and it's not backing down to create a cultural alternative without bashing what's going on, right? Like, like I had some conversations with some people recently, and they're very politically oriented, and I kept my mouth shut for most of it, because I'm just not that clear in the political sphere. Yeah. But the reality is, like, in political terms, we're called ambassadors. Yeah. Which means we're from a different nation, bringing a message to this culture, not to come and change this culture, but to tell people the message of a different culture and say, look, there's another way to live that's out there. You can live that way if you'd like. Yeah. It involves Jesus, and he loves you unconditionally, and so much so that he died for you on a cross.
In fact, he tells you what his kingdom looks like.
And then he tells us his kingdom.
Matthew 5-7.
That's right. That's right. And so we get this like outline of God's kingdom, and a free invitation to join it. Yeah. And then you get sent out as an ambassador to tell others about that experience. And it's like, well, that's great. We're not sent out as judges.
No.
Right? Not to say that there's not a place for discernment, because that is a type of judgment that we are to have, which is discernment about what is, what we're to do or say, and that kind of thing. That's wisdom. But we aren't set out as magistrates. We're not sent out as like
break some knees.
We're not sent out as executioners either, right? We are sent out as ambassadors of the kingdom. And I think there is a place for truth to be talked about, but how we do that
can come. That
has to be so.
That can either be done well or it can do damage.
Totally, and so we have
truth
to be
and love, right?
Truth,
so it's just
and
like truth without love is just a hammer.
Exactly, and I agree with you. Like, your philosophy on youth ministry is very, very similar to mine. This idea of we want to create a place where kids feel like they're safe to come and experience meaningful relationships.
Safety is a weird thing. I think. Just subconsciously, it's just something. It's like, of course you want to do that, but the more I've been in ministry, it's more like that is sometimes rare, and that's sad.
It is.
That this might be a place where somebody can finally let their guard down, and actually be genuinely like, I'm okay here and I know I'm not going to get hurt. Unlike at school or at home or whatever. And it's just like, oh man, that's too bad. Yeah. That's actually very sad, but
it's actually a really hard value to hang on to when your youth ministry starts to get bigger. Like,
yes,
like that's something I'm finding really challenging. So this year is the biggest we've ever been in our youth group. And it's getting like it's weird to me. I'm like, we're in a community that I would expect to have a 10 to 15 sort of attendance in our youth program. Our attendance is hitting like the 50s right now.
Yeah. It gets hard to,
at that point, it's like, well, safety's our value, but I can't be everywhere.
Yeah.
And I have no idea what's happening down that hallway.
So you 2-to-1 leader ratio.
Well, you have a 2-to-1
25 leaders.
Yeah.
It's not that hard.
I'm actually not too far. I'm
really?
at 16.
Oh, that's actually amazing.
I've got 16 dedicated, amazing volunteer
leaders. You want a pro youth tip right here? Get a butt ton of leaders.
You have so many leaders.
There's been times where even when there's 10 kids, it's just like me and Luke. So you got to have at least one other person. Liability.
Yeah, of course. That checks out.
But it's like, man, kids are psycho when there's less leaders. The more leaders they are, the better behaved they are, because I don't know, people are cracking down.
Well, I don't know if it's just cracking down. It's like you have an adult there who cares about you.
Yeah.
And so you're more willing to like come into that space and not just cause chaos.
Yeah.
Because you're getting attention already. You're being genuinely cared for. And the presence of a bunch of adults who aren't there to bring down the hammer, but are there still as adults.
They're there
brings
to be
the maturity level of the room up.
No,
you know?
you shouldn't hit that kid with the metal pole.
That's right.
Might not work.
Yeah.
The way you want it to.
Yeah. Maybe not the metal pole. Here's a pool noodle.
Yeah,
and with this, right? It's like we're not like judgmental, but we just want to do it safely. Like beat a kid up, but do it well.
I want to beat them up softly.
So,
with a pool noodle.
But seriously, having a dedicated team of committed leaders who really care about the kids, it makes a world of massive difference. Because, I mean, I've done youth ministry without enough leaders. And
it's horrible.
It's hard.
It is. It's tiring. You get to the end of the night and you're like, I'm done. I'm fried. Versus like when
you're
it can
constantly
just
putting
be
out fires.
But I think that's a good point though, bringing up like the larger groups get, the harder it is to, because you can't see what goes on around every corner, and all of a sudden so and so said or did something to so and so, and it's just like now they hate each other and now they're gonna fight, and these friends hate those friends, and you're like, why did it turn into this?
When I started out,
it doesn't take much.
We were about safety. We weren't about safety, but like having a safe space, having the youth group be somewhere that's safe to come and let your guard down was a major value that was almost easy to uphold in that early stages. Yeah. And I found over the past year or so, I have a lot more conversations with youth who's like, well, do you know what's going on? You didn't see this, or that I got mistreated this way this week. And I'm just like, that's happening in my youth group. And I can't, it's like, I don't want that to be happening in my youth group, but I have no way to be everywhere. Yeah. So it's like my leaders are spreading out way more. Like we're way more all over the property. Like
in some ways I've loved, it's one of those things where people, it's like you go to talk to other ministers, like, how big's your church? It's like, I don't really care. Like whoop-de-doo. Like for years we had, in COVID, we had 3 kids, and it was kind of awesome.
That is awesome.
We had like tea. It's just, I'd be like, come to my house, let's have tea. It's awesome. Yeah. There's something like, and this isn't to say, hey, big youth groups are bad. This is great. It's more kids hearing about
the size of the youth group doesn't matter.
No, not
it's going to come down to things like this: the philosophy of your ministry. You know, do you care?
I love
and you do
having less because I actually get to talk. To every kid. Yeah. See how their day is going, and there's something a lot more intimate, and there's just in those relationships versus like, and I remember when I first started there, the kids were inviting their friends like crazy, and we got up to 35 one time, and I was like, and we had 8 leaders. Okay. And I was like, this is chaos. And I didn't talk to anybody. I managed a bunch of kids.
You ran the program
and
without being
was like that for half
to
a
the
year.
Kids.
Until half those kids graduated or moved, and it was like, it was great, but it was also like you were standing there yelling like, come here, make a circle, stop talking for like 25 minutes, and then you finally there and try to explain a game for another 25 minutes, and you play for 5 minutes. Yeah. Just kidding. No,
but that happens.
But I was just like, oh, this is absolutely, well, mind you, I say that, but my group of 8 last night was just as bad.
There was a lot of energy. They were hopped up on something, man. Maybe it was full moon. I don't know.
I think what you saw last night was that is the most active group of kids I think I've had in 9 years. Like,
it was a great
on
group,
like on pure energy levels.
Yeah,
these kids are wild.
Look, I didn't come to judge your group in any way, just so you know that. But like, I had a ton of fun last night.
Yeah.
So
didn't get to judge a group, but
I found it
horrible.
They were not. The thing was, they weren't horrible, right? Like, there was some moments where they weren't listening to you, and you had to grab their attention back.
What do you do? That's like,
but that's just youth ministry,
and
like
for 9 years, that's pretty normal.
Yeah, that's normal. And the thing is, like, it was a ton of fun. Like, I had a ton of fun hanging out with the group. I would
rather have that than the kids who just don't want to say anything.
That's right.
Because you're just like, it's like trying to just drag people through mud.
You ask a question.
Hey,
everyone
guys, you want to play this game? No. Well, this isn't going to go over very well.
That's not going to happen.
And once again, that excitement's contagious.
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Now, I had a youth night a couple years ago where 3 kids showed up. Four kids. They're going to get mad at me if I don't remember who they all were. But anyways, like 3 or 4 of them showed up, and it was just me and them, and one other leader. And it wasn't our regular youth night. It was like a Bible study thing that had been fairly well attended, but this week it was like 3 kids and one leader, and I'm like, oh man. So I look at them, I go, you guys just want to go have a fire at my place? They're like, yeah. Those kids, every time I see them, if we talk about like favorite memories, it's the first one they think of is like, we went and had tea at your house and you had just gotten kittens, and so we like held a kitten, drank tea around a campfire in your backyard, and like for them that was peak youth ministry. Like,
I would love to do that.
Right? You're always welcome, by the way. That's
what we do with
it's
with
not
our
about numbers,
friends,
right?
Because like,
it's that.
What do you want to do? I want to go sit and visit and have an honest conversation.
Yeah.
And the older kids get, like, the easier that is. Like, they have a hard time doing that with a 12-year-old, but like the grade 7 and 8 kids, they're just like, I want to run. And it's just like, okay, we can run. That's fine. But they hit an age where it's just like, nope, I don't want to run. I want to talk about my day.
I want to have a real connection with another human being who cares about me.
Yeah, I remember for me that was about 14 too. Up until that point, I was just like, let's throw stuff.
And something shifts in the brain at that age, but that's exactly right. Like,
I remember very much feeling like I want to have an actual like conversation and start to be honest, but all people knew of me at that time was, oh, there's Crazy Chris running around again. It's like, I actually want to talk now.
I want to grow up. Please help me.
So just even just for 5 minutes, and then I'll go back.
But those moments, that's what makes a difference in kids' lives, is when you can personally connect with them and care about them, and that's huge. Like you said, like last night, you could talk to every kid at your youth group, and each one feels that personal connection. That's going to make a difference. Yeah, they're going to be able to say, I was cared for, right? And somebody cared about me in my life. Chris, we've been talking for a lot longer than what I said we were going to do.
I know.
And I really appreciate that.
You can edit this down to like 30 minutes of the stuff you feel is
I don't care how long it is. It was more for your sake that I wasn't going to overdo it.
I don't know. I could ramble all day, but...
You probably could.
What do you think are the biggest challenges for teenagers?
We kind of talked about that already. Drugs.
What are you doing or wanting to do about that problem? Make drugs illegal. Just kidding. They already did that. Like, oh, that's working. Just kidding.
Well, if you start selling them, you can solve other problems.
Fundraiser. Youth fundraiser.
It's a new youth fundraiser.
They didn't let me do a 50-50. I was like, they always make so much money. They're like, that's gambling. It's like, oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
It would have worked so good.
They never let us do those kind of cool things. Yeah. Our fundraiser is like, we sell cookies.
Yeah.
We stole that one from the Girl Guides.
Cookies. We sell brownies, special church brownies.
There's a lot of people in our community who already do that.
Yeah, I know. Just
I don't want to, nose in on their market.
These brownies so much more expensive.
That's right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
In what ways have you been surprised by youth ministry? I don't know. That's actually a weird question.
Isn't that a weird question?
It's weird because I'm like, my initial gut reaction is probably lots, but then it's like, but is that true? Not really. There hasn't actually been any surprises because I've lived through it my whole life. Yeah. So it's like, I think there's anything that could have been a surprise. It was just like, oh no, that's normal. We've been there. Yeah. In fairness, I think that's a good question to ask any youth pastor. But when I first wrote up these questions, I was thinking of Ethan, who I did in my first interview, which I'll have to redo. So I guess he'll be my second interview now because you're my first now. Nice. But I asked it because he's newer in youth ministry. He's only been doing it 2 years. And so
he had finished Bible school, started out, he's gone 2 years in his youth group. So the question, like, what surprised you? And was kind of that concept of like, okay, 2 years, you came out of Bible school with probably expectations, got into a church. What surprised you? What shook you up, right? But even for veteran youth workers, which, by the way, if we're past 5 years, we're veteran youth workers now.
If you passed like a year and a half, that started, it was like, oh my gosh, you beat the average.
The average was like 8 months when I started out.
I know, that was gross.
It was terrible. And I only made it 8 months in my first church. So I was average.
Yeah. Way to be another statistic.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's what I'm here for. But now
I'm happy to go 40.
You're a veteran now. So but even for veteran youth pastors, it's like, what's surprising us in youth ministry? Like what's the surprises? What's the stuff that you're like, wow, I didn't expect this?
Biggest surprise in youth ministry was just the same as church ministry, was you have to learn how to understand what a budget is.
Okay.
And how to read it. Yeah. It's like learning to do your taxes for the first time. It's like, you didn't learn this in high school. And all of a sudden you have go to a congregational meeting and you have to give reports and be like, so how has your year been? It's like, I guess just kidding. That's not actually a surprise. That's just the job. Yeah. Surprised though.
So that's a part of the job we don't often feel prepared for, because it is a bit of a shock the first time you have to do budget and you go, oh.
Well, I just couldn't even read the paper. I was like, can you explain this to me?
Yeah. Somebody tell me how this works.
I get it now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all important stuff, but.
Well, we figure it out. Yeah.
What have you been surprised by? I don't know. Maybe. Oh, okay. Here's one surprise. And this is just something I've noticed. I don't know if this is. It's not really it's kind of pertains to youth ministry. I've noticed there's a weird generational gap. I don't know if you've experienced the same thing. It is the parents of the kids who should be in youth group right now. There is a lack of those parents in the church.
Yes.
It's so it'd be like, what do we got? Ages anywhere from like 40 to 60, somewhere in that. Nope. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. My dad is 60.
It's like the middle age, so it's like 35 to like 55, kind of a.
Yeah, in there, there seems to be, and I'm thinking, I mean,
it's like the elder millennials.
It was
right?
like there was like the huge Christian movement in the boomer world, and the boomer kids, half of them, I don't know what happened in the church, but it seems like they just went missing, and then, but there's a weird trickle effect now in youth ministry now, in like. Youth ministry for me growing up was like, that was normal. There was a lot of kids in church.
Yeah.
And now to have kids in churches, and I think that was the start of a trend that has trickled through generations as well, but I think it started there, where I feel like our generation it has a different perspective of church. Like it almost feels like a bit of a rebuilding, because like church trajectory wise, statistically, is declining in North America at a pretty good rate.
Yep.
And it is changing and has changed. And what it looks like in 10, 20 years, like how are we shaping our kids and how are they being raised in the world today to, be a witness for Jesus, and what's that going to look like? That's kind of that's a bit of a surprise. I think part of me was maybe naive, thinking it would be the same as, it's just, you got kids and every church has kids, and all of a sudden it's just like, nope, my entire youth group, except for 2 kids, is from kids outside of this building. Wow. Yeah, that's what it was like for my first 3 years. Yeah. And that's when we were actually the biggest then, but it's because they just invite their friends. And then they'd invite their friends, and they'd invite their friends. Yeah. And all of a sudden when one of those people leaves, it's just like, and they all disappeared.
Yeah.
Right. They come in clumps.
Yeah.
But
totally.
I've noticed it's weird looking at church. There's a lot of, you got a lot of the older folks, and then there's a gap. Not everybody, but then now, like my age, I've noticed there's a lot of young families starting my age and a little bit older and a little bit younger, that are kind of like the next crew of leaders. Like there's this weird gap in there. I don't know.
Yeah, I think.
I don't know if you felt that too.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. So I haven't been to a lot of churches in the past couple of years, but I suspect you're probably not too far off. My church I'm at is a bit odd. We have a fairly strong presence of every generation.
Oh, that's awesome.
In our church. But part of that is because in the rural community, generational and families being in a church is a little bit more common. I think that's part of it
compared to like a city.
Yeah, where there's a little bit more fluidity in the generational lineage
and
in a church.
To be clear, I have zero research to back up what I'm saying. This is purely observational
conjecture. Yeah, no, it's fine.
But I've noticed it not just in our church here,
yeah.
but I've talked to other people and they're like, oh yeah, I've noticed that as well.
Yeah.
And so,
well, and Brightview is weird. Like my church is weird. So I'm not trying to say like my church is a normal. I think my church is weird. We are a rural church that has a growing children's ministry, a growing youth ministry in the middle of a farm community. In like our church is in the middle of a canola field. Yeah, like that's not normal. Most churches around us are aging out, and are shutting their doors because they don't have enough attendance.
Well, that's the one thing I was going to say is going to be shifting in. I bet you in the next few years, a lot of the small churches, like we've already seen one in Nipawin shut down.
Yeah.
Waka's struggling. But I think the churches that do exist, they will be just as full as they are now, but there will be less of them.
Yeah. I think that's
people. It's like max exodus of I'm going to leave this little church and go to whatever's available. So, but
yeah, well, I think we're going to see a lot of smaller churches. So it used to be like even on my drive here. So I've never been to Saskatchewan before. Never driven through. Yeah, it's weird.
It's so weird,
dude. I
guess what reason you have to come over here? It's like me going to Manitoba.
It's like why do you go? Yeah.
I've gone a lot to Alberta and BC, but I've rarely had east.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, Winnipeg. Just kidding.
Just kidding. You heard it here.
Yeah, no, they're cool. Actually, Manitoba is like, and Saskatchewan, I feel like we're conglomerated into one province. Like culture,
I think
rural.
Even in the minds of those of us who aren't from this area, I kind of mixed the two together.
I'm happy to be blended with Manitoba, not with Alberta though. Those
I get it.
You cross that border and something changes.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up on Vancouver Island, and then I've slowly moved further and further east over the years. Yeah. So I'm in Alberta now, and I'm like, man, what a cultural change!
It's the Wild West over there.
It's wild.
But don't put this on.
But what I was trying to say though was like, I
got the Alberta stuff.
No, I don't care. Bring it on, Alberta.
I know. I do.
No, I mean, they probably have guns.
Exactly.
I mean, I have guns. So I fit right.
They will use them differently than you.
So, but what I was trying to get at was on my drive here, I was very interested to see, like, I went through all these little small communities and towns along the highway that, like, barely, they won't even show up on a map. Like, they're tiny, right? Yeah. And they've got these old rundown churches, these old rundown buildings. And I think we see a shutting down of the small church. Mm-hmm. Like, there was a time where we built churches in everywhere. Like, if there was a human there, we put a church next to their house, right? And it's like, that's not sustainable today.
Well, no, it's just not. I mean, you drive through some middle of nowhere towns, and it's just like there's not even work here, right? So that's the thing is like.
Well, that's big. Urbanization is a big thing.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of that.
Yeah, it affects like northern Canada a lot, I think, because there isn't a lot out here.
I just realized, are you recording?
Of course.
Okay, because I was gonna be like, what if after all this.
I didn't record any of it.
No,
I checked. There's a red light there, yeah. So we're good. OBS is recording, and then I checked the camera before we started. Just kidding. Yeah, we're live. Dude, there's no editing. I don't know what you were thinking. I can't believe you said all that.
I know. Yeah, please take out all the contentious stuff.
Yeah, we've been recording for a little more than an hour though, so why don't we wrap it up there?
Sure.
If you're cool with that. We didn't even do an intro. We just started talking, which is great. So I'm not sure how I'm even going to do
an intro now.
Then I got to like edit it to the front.
Post-show, yeah.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, this was at the end.
So at the end, I got to hang out here with Chris Neudorf. He's youth pastor in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan.
There we go.
And I got to hang out as his youth group last night and then just talking today about youth ministry. Yeah. So this has been awesome. I really appreciate you letting me come in and join you guys. I had a ton of fun last night with your youth. They're a great group.
Yeah, me too.
Fun group. Yeah. It was neat. It was neat to get in and play a bit of soccer with your group. And then they like immediately didn't care that I was new or a stranger. I was part of the group right away. Yeah. Started getting shoved around right away. I was like, this is great. Yeah. So
throwing elbows.
You've got great youth leaders as well. Like I got to chat with almost all your leaders. Yeah, excellent leaders. They're awesome. It's actually one of them's your wife, so you're biased, but the rest of them are great.
Yeah, but she's the only leader till you have another baby. But it's nice to have a connection with the camp so close. That's been and having Aaron come down as well has been it's been sweet because I think there's a really awesome place, and we didn't talk about this, but there's an awesome place for this youth camp connection if you can like maintain.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, like your youth can be
hard on that right now.
They can be the cabin leaders and the workers at the camp, and then experience all the greatness of camp during the summer, to then come back and have an established connection with a church and a youth group.
Yeah, massive.
And there can be a whole, I mean, that's the dreams to have like this cyclical relationship going on. But I
and the camp benefits and the youth group benefits.
Yeah, oh yeah,
and it's like
win-win.
And ultimately the real winners are the kids. They get this incredible opportunity to build relationship with God and with people who care about them. And I am trying so hard right now to build that camp relationship, but our church hasn't had one in a while. So it's like, it's been a drive.
Yeah.
And
part of our thing was the camp was going through some turmoil, but things are stable. Things are good. They're looking up. They're looking positive. And youth group's been kind of the same thing. I think it's all the post-COVID area.
It's taken time to rebuild.
It's taken time to stabilize and to be like, okay, we have like regular connection, regular camp. But yeah, anyways, I'm curious to see where the next year goes with that.
I am too. Well, thanks, Chris. This has been awesome.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks for actually being willing to do this with me, because I mean, all 5 people who watch this will really appreciate that you took the time. So.
Yeah. Hey, well, if you like this content, like and subscribe to my channel. I don't have one.
All right. That's awesome. Okay.
Put my handle in the screen there.
We'll end how we started, which is just by stopping.
Yeah.